Batman, Man-Bat, Gotham, Ham-Goth, Batmobile, today's craft. I thought it was about time I turned another famous vehicle into some horrific creation, and what could be more perfect than Tim Burton's 1989 Batmobile? That's gotta be a recipe for gold. And I'd like to give a special shout out to Shane Handy for starting this unnerving train of thought. Welcome back to Midnight Hobbies, and today I'll be turning the Batmobile into, well, a mobile bat. Starting off with some Wayne Enterprise approved cardboard packaging, I began to break down the pieces, using my finger as a blade before remembering blades exist, and so do paper cuts. With a smaller piece, I began to sketch out the side profile of the vehicle.
First try.
And once I popped it out and was seeing double, I moved on to the rest of the foundation. With more packaging strips, I drew the top profile of the Batmobile sides. I found these pieces the hardest to figure out as I'm trying to accommodate all the curves of the vehicle on a 3D level, and I refused to do measurements, which I'm sure didn't help, but eventually I got there. I moved on to slicing out these little ports and filling them in with cardboard behind to help accentuate the depth and to give it some visual noise to look mildly screen accurate. I also made these little vents out of cardboard offcuts for extra eye candy, and with the top strips done and dusted, I glued them onto the side walls. Ooh, those are some thick scissors. Happy with the curve so far, I moved on to the far side panels of the vehicle, which received more vents and holes for non-functional car lights. I also tore up the wheel ports, as it is tradition at this point for these anthropomorphic vehicles to have limbs bursting out and tearing at the metal framework. Even though I've only done it once before, we're calling it tradition. These panels were glued in place, as were these regular wheel coverings for the back wheels, which I decided would house standard tyres, since a bat only has 2 legs, and I'm clearly going for realism, before filling in any gaps with more packaging and PVA glue. Foam sheet was used to cover some of the larger gaps before I went back in with more cardboard packaging to plug the bottoms. For the center console, I precariously found its shape by trying to hold a piece of packaging between the 2 sides, which you can see worked effortlessly, before removing all of its little bits and bobs to glue it onto the rest, which I also held in place as it dried because I'm losing my mind. The Batmobile's front tube nozzle thingamajig was constructed out of more foam sheet, though I glued and rolled the front edge over to give it a bit more thickness, which was at least held in place with a bunch of pegs instead of my hands this time. See, I'm learning. Some offcuts of the foam was used to build up more trim details before I filled in the back with a base plate. I then noticed I wouldn't have much space to squeeze in the giant bat head I'm planning to make, so some extra length was removed. It's almost like I could have avoided this if I didn't measure everything with my hands and eyes, but it's looking good so far, so I moved on to making the spookiest part of this build. The wheels. I engraved the tyre treads onto a piece of foam sheet with a hobby knife before going back in with a pencil to give them a bit more dimension. To achieve a solid circle for the wheel's centre bone, I traced out the bottom of this cork lid I had lying around, which I then cut out and glued to the tyre, leaving me with this adorable little snare drum. Drum noise. I built up some random wheel details with more foam before checking to see whether they would actually fit into the wheel ports, since I didn't check before building them. Don't be like me. See, they fit. I know what I'm doing. I glued the front nozzle thingamajig into its cylindrical shape before squeezing it into place on the vehicle. And I'm not too stressed about the look of that ugly bottom joint, since if you haven't figured it out already, this is going to be the creature's mouth. And to get started on this beast, I'm going to need some styrofoam. Using this slightly squashed styrofoam bowl and this smaller one I sliced in half, I glued them together to act as the creature's bulbous eyes. I swear, they're eyes. And then I bulked up its shape with some foil so it could occupy the whole of the driver's seat. Now doesn't he look happy? And to give him some fur, I naturally turned to the old trusty air-dry clay. I built up a layer of clay to cover all of the foil, before moving in with some sculpting tools to clean it up and to add a nose I immediately regretted.
I am very uncomfortable.
With the nose out of the way, I created a fur texture by jabbing the clay numerous times and then drawing it back to look like slicked hair. And with the head taking shape, I think it's time we injected a little more bat into this diorama. I thought it would be cool if the vehicle's cosmetic wings were replaced with real ones bursting out from within. So with some armature wire, I eyeballed the length I was after before cutting out 4 pieces per wing to help build the bone structure. I taped the ends together before using my drill and pliers to twist them into one piece. Oh, dang it. Yeah, looking flabulous. I also concocted these 2 legs for the front before I began adding muscle tissue with strips of foil. Then I took them outside to give them a good old plastering. As I always do, I mixed the plaster with black paint to ensure I had all the foil covered when I was painting, and remember those legs I made 22 seconds ago? I hate them, so I went back and made these longer, spindly versions that then received the same clay covering as the head. And as I left all of those pieces to dry, I returned to the main vehicle to buff up those dead areas. Yeah. Using this cardboard cylinder you get at the centre of a roll of receipt paper, I trimmed its edges so it could squeeze between the wheels, and I coiled a bit of wire around them to make it look like some sort of suspension mechanism. Foam sheet offcuts from the wheels were shoved into random places that I thought could not only hide my poor cutting skills, but look like weird pieces that you could possibly find on a Batmobile. I'd like to thank all my crafting elders for this hack. Now I just need a place to shove these. So I sliced at the hindquarters and tore up the cardboard before jamming these salad fingers into place to ensure they would fit later during assembly. And with all of the pieces done, they're ready to be primed. Though if only I could think of someone or something that could, help me get that done. After laying down some newspaper, forgive me Eddie, I made a basic black paint and Mod Podge mix before drowning every piece in this scoop to ensure the pieces are protected when I start painting them. And if you're wondering why I use the creepy handmade bowl, it's because I find the ceramic is actually very easy to clean, and it's the perfect size for mixing paints. That and I'm doomed to use it for all eternity. It's just the price you pay with these cursed items, I hit all of the bat pieces with an initial layer of chocolatey brown before pinking the eyes and moving through with a raw sienna dry brush to accentuate the details. The bottom of the feet received a pinky palm before I used the same colour to line the inner edge of where the wings will be going. The eyes were whipped up in a similar fashion to the mystery machine, in which I mean I had no plan, and then I coated them with a bit of gloss Mod Podge to make those puppies shine. To finish off the wings, I had this thin foam sheet that I think I got in a package, and then began sketching out the sizes I was after, before slicing them out and gluing them into place. And if you're wondering why the wings aren't continuing along the forearm like they anatomically should,
I'm no scientist.
I mixed up a brownish yellow paint with some water to glaze the wings, and then built up a gradient of dark, dirtier washes towards the centre. I also kissed the edges with some red for veins, and since I had some left over, I used the dark wash on the other limbs, making sure to dab off the excess and re-highlight the edges with another dry brush. I primed the Batmobile a black matte since I was out of very dark grey, and went in on the little side details with a metallic silver. The torn edges also got solid coats before I moved on to dry brushing the whole piece with the same silver. I think dry brushing will forever be my favourite part, as it's practically another level of visual noise that's brought to a piece, but gives it so much life and weight and could do it forever. Makes any pile of packaging cardboard look good. I whipped up these little teeth out of air dry clay before sticking them around the mouth, and then thought about giving it the regular long slimy tongue like the rest of my models have, but nah, let's get nuts. These little tentacles were made out of wire and some more air dry clay that got a purple and pink paint job and a delicious coating of gloss Mod Podge. I then chose a few I liked the most and glued them together onto a small piece of foam that I then carved away so that it could easily slide into the throat without taking any of the teeth along with it. The head was squeezed into place, which then reminded me I still needed to give this guy his little hat. So more packaging cardboard was sketched and trimmed to size so that it could easily wrap around the head of our host. I then sliced up this sheet of foam so that I could glue it into a curve and squeeze it in behind the main covering, adding the Batmobile's oversized exhaust for good measure as well. This random plate was cut out just to fill this dead space here before it all received the mandatory black Mod Podge cover and silver dry brush. The teeth got a red gum touch-up before I carefully inserted its uncomfortable mouth tentacles. Please remind me to never say mouth tentacles again. And for those purists, don't worry, the tentacles can be replaced for a much less exciting regular tongue, just like in the movie. I gave the eyes one more coat of gloss and then began gluing in the wings. And why am I gluing it with PVA and balancing it all with paint? Because my hot glue gun decided to die right before this part, so be sure to send your condolences for Gluey. You will be missed. The wheels were stuck in place too before I covered the lights with some gloss orange. Now all we need is a piece of prime real estate. Moving outside to build the base, I grabbed what I have left of this horrible XPS foam that my hardware store has now stopped supplying. So I'm screwed. I thought a circle base would best suit the model, so I sketched the outline of a plate before stupidly trying to rip it out with my hands. Oh no. I then etched in where I wanted the road to be and peeled away some of the foam with my fingers since I wanted the road to be a bit more rough after its decades of use, and then used some wire and glue to stick that broken edge back on. I plastered the whole piece before taking it back inside to give it a base coat of brown and varying levels of dry brushing. There's not really much more to this part of the build, so just enjoy this montage of me dry brushing. I sure am. Static grass, but that means I coated the sides where I wanted grass with glue before using my static grass applicator to give a lovely patch of 4mm dark green goodness. And for those unaware, the pin charges the grass with static that causes the strands to stand upright in the glue, so once dried, you're left with magic. I then dressed it up with some small pieces of clump foliage and these little root things I found at a dollar store years ago. Though the lawns were still too clean for my liking, so I cut a bunch of the root pieces into crumbs and sprinkled this oregano all over the piece before sealing it all in with some watered down gloss Mod Podge so that I'd be left with a muddy shine. And just as a final touch, I whipped up this fun little road sign that was sliced, stuck, limbed and painted, being sure to give it a good old griming too. I grimed up the rest of the pieces, stuck them all in place, and then it was time to go in for the beauty shots. Thanks for watching everyone, and for all of your support. If you've got any other recommendations for more creepy vehicles you'd like to see in future videos, let me know in the comments. Otherwise, I'll see you at the next one. Take care everyone, and I'll see you soon.